Recording.
Hi everyone, my name is Ashley. I have about 10 years of working experience working for a corporate and startup. I've always wondered how can I make my career more fulfilling? And that's why I have my partner here, Michelle, to my right. We wanted to embark this journey to share with you some career tips to make sure that you have a fulfilling career.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Cipriano. I have over 25 years of experience in both big companies as well as startups and probably some in between. And I'm delighted to be here today to share some insights with you about careers.
Definitely. I definitely wanted to leverage Michelle's career tips and share that with the audience today. Today we are going to discuss some important topics that happens lately. I am sure that a lot of you guys seen that in the news. Lots of layoffs, downsizing, even big company like FedEx, we're seeing that lots of layoffs going on there. Google, Meta, a list goes on. This got us thinking, hey, is the job market still stable? In general, a lot of things that we can discuss with Michelle today in regards to job stability, what kind of signs to look for, practical tips, and etc. So yeah, Michelle, would love to hear your thought, just to understand the market space a little bit. What is your thought when it comes to layoff, downsizing that happens lately?
Well, I think first of all, like you mentioned, the job market. I think the job market overall is stable. I believe in technology. There's been a lot of layoffs lately because we had a lot of over hiring during the pandemic, and now the companies are kind of understanding what their baseline demand's going to be, and they're adjusting. But in general, when you talk about layoffs, a lot of times companies will say, "Oh, we never have layoffs, or we're never going to have layoffs." And I'll tell you from experience and looking at the history of corporate America, no company has ever had a layoff until it has a layoff, and they all will at some point or another. So nobody's immune. It's a fact of having a corporate job, whether it be in a big company or a startup. Layoffs are a fact of life. You need to be prepared, and you need to do what you can to be the one chosen not to be laid off. But in the event that you are, you need to be ready for, how do I get that next position?
Yeah, absolutely. So Michelle, you talked about overhiring during the pandemic, right? That's one reason that could cause layoff lately. What others reason that could be potentially causing a layoff right now?
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously the big one right now, I think in technology in particular, is the pandemic and in coming out of the pandemic, but also startups have been hit kind of hard this year, and last year because they found it more difficult to raise money, and so startups started running out of money, and they really don't have much choice at that point. They have to lay off individuals in order to stay in business. So that's a reason. Other times are some kind of corporate mandate. The board of directors or shareholders or whatever want additional profits, and as a result, organizations make changes to fulfill those needs or those demands from the board of directors or the shareholders. So layoffs are almost always reactionary, and at least from the perspective of an employee, it's difficult to know that they're coming. There are some warning signs that we can talk about, kind of individually, that, like, wow, maybe I'm vulnerable, or maybe something is coming along. But in general, they're because they're reactionary. There's not a whole lot of definitive way of seeing what's going to happen.
I see. Well, definitely in these pockets today, we are going to definitely get some tips from Michelle, to see what are the how to say, like, I know there's no definite way, but there's certain sign that you can see what layoffs are coming your way. Um, Before we jump into practical tips like how you can protect yourself, I would like to touch on how we can spot those signs. For example, let's say if it's for corporate, can I assume that the layoff actually has been planned ahead of time, like 6 months above? And for startup, maybe it's more like a short term kind of thing. So can you help me to
Yeah,
shed some light on both?
yeah, absolutely. As I said, they're always reactionary. So it's always like something happened. I mean, nobody plans. Nobody says, "Oh, next year we're going to have layoffs." They don't do that. But what they do is they look at what they're trying to accomplish, and a lot of times there's external pressure, as I mentioned, either shareholders, board of directors, customers, whatever it may be, and as a result, they decide that the best way to deal with this demand is to lay off employees. um, Bigger companies definitely plan on a longer time frame than startups. So I would say in a large company, it's probably at least at the high level, it's being talked about for at least a quarter, and there's more structure around how it happens, how the individuals that are going to be affected get selected, and then what services are available to them if they are going to be affected. In smaller companies, the horizon is probably less. Take a startup, for example. They're trying to raise money. They think they're on to a good potential source of funding, and it falls through. They oftentimes are left with a very short window where they have to make changes to the organization to be able to continue making payroll. So in those circumstances, layoffs come very rapidly. And it could be, in some startups, it could be that a large customer, like let's say you have 5 large customers and a bunch of small ones. Well, if one of those large customers decides that they want to find a different solution, that could be 20% of the revenue coming into the company. You might learn that at the end of a quarter, and you may only have a month or so to make changes, to be able to make it through and find more customers. So consequently, those layoffs come much more quickly.
Yeah. And especially when the company is not signing new deals, right? Not just renewing the current, but not signing the new deals is also like a sign to know whether,
Absolutely.
how are they doing in terms of business. Um,
Every company, to survive, they absolutely have to be signing new business. And so if you see existing customers dropping off, or you see that the rate of new customers coming on board, if you have visibility to that, and you can see that that's the case, that's a sign that there's going to be a change. Maybe it's not always layoffs. Maybe they cut other programs. Maybe they make other changes. Maybe there's not free lunches on every day, but you can tell that something is going to be changed to adjust for the fact that now we have fewer customers joining than we did before.
I see. Michelle, what do you think? Like startup versus corporate. Um, which one is more prone to the layoff? Like it doesn't matter, or it doesn't matter.
I honestly, I don't think it matters. I think startups probably, if I had to say, startups might have more frequent layoffs, but in big companies, they have large layoffs that affect a lot of people at once. Again, because they're looking at it and saying, look, we don't want to do this very often. They're also more immune to kind of immediate changes that might force them to have a layoff because of their size. So I think they don't have as many layoffs, but oftentimes when they have layoffs, we saw just recently Microsoft laid off 1,200 people. I think UPS laid off 12,000 people. So when a big company lays off people, it's often quite large. Um, Smaller companies, they can be forced into making a quick decision where they have to lay people off, but it's generally a few people here and there because that's just enough to get them through to that next event, new customers, funding, whatever it may be.
Yeah. And also another thing I also want to highlight is that I think there's a difference between the layoff to like for startup and corporate. If you are laid off in corporate, sometimes depending on what your role is, you may be offered to find another role in another department because the company is huge, has a lot of other opportunities. However, in startup, you might not get that opportunity, right? Because the numbers of position is already small to begin with, so you might be just have to look elsewhere. So there's, I would say, a little corporate benefits there when it comes to the layoff as well.
Absolutely, and I think, in the case of a big company, they realize that they've invested in this individual, and so they want to find other roles for them if it's possible. So generally, yeah, they you have that option. Generally, severance is going to be better in a corporate environment. In a startup, oftentimes there is no severance, and then certainly like uh, services to help you find that next job. That's something that isn't often offered in startups either, but is quite often offered to corporate larger companies for their employees who are affected in a layoff. So I think it's a much safer environment, but some people really enjoy, feeling like, hey, we're going to change the world with this new idea, and so that's the part of the allure to startups. The other part of the allure to startups is you get stock options. You feel like you have a potentially tremendous upside financially, and you also feel like you're part of a much smaller team, and you're making decisions and taking actions that have a much bigger sway on the outcome for the company. So both situations have tremendous benefits depending on your personal desires.
Absolutely. It sounds like Michelle, like regardless of the layoff in startup and corporate, right? It's something that is out of your control, right? It's corporate has been done before that, right? Startup, there are things that happens outside actually could affect the layoff. So can you share with me as an employee, how can you bulletproof yourself to make sure that when it comes to discussion for layoff, regardless is right away, just like startup or planning layoff, that I am as an employee are protected. Can you share some practical tips?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the best way of looking at it, because if you work for a company long enough, you're going to experience a time when the company has a layoff. And so what you need to do is you need to insulate yourself. And so you need to think in terms of what would, when they're talking about who's going to get laid off, what kind of people are they going to lay off and what kind of people are they going to keep? So they're going to keep people who have a broader skill set. So if the choice is between one person in a department has to get laid off, the people who have the broadest skill set are probably the people who are going to stay around longer. The other thing is, and I think this is probably the most critical, and this helps not just in avoiding getting laid off, but it also helps at review time. It helps at time for raises and everything else, or time for promotion. And that is, make sure your boss and the people you work around understand the value you deliver to the company. This might be easier in smaller companies and less clear in bigger companies. But like, for example, if you're working on a project and you know that that project got used in some event or some way to get new customers, or if it resulted in some cost savings in operations, um, make that known. And you don't have to be obvious about it. You can, the next time you're having a conversation with your boss, you can say, hey, as a result, as a matter of fact, I was talking to somebody in accounting, and I realized that this project that we worked on over the last 2 months actually resulted in a gigantic cost savings. And um, and so, that's just something to be proud of, and to share with people, and kind of keep it top of mind. And you can talk the same way with your colleagues. so that everyone's aware of the value that you're delivering. And so when it comes time to select those people who get laid off, they look at you and say, wow, she has a tremendous breadth of skill, so we can use her in lots of different places. And she's also a major contributor because I can, off the top of my head, remember 4 or 5 things that resulted in either major savings, customer wins, customer saves, whatever it is that you're responsible for, that your team is most involved in.
Like I think that part is something that I'm struggling as well, because let's say if you wanted to showcase your value to your direct manager, you can easily do that on your one-on-one, right? Like you could try to justify the work you have done and what's the impact of it. But I think the challenging part is that what if your boss doesn't have a say when it comes to the layoff and you only have one person? Like let's say your boss has a say as well, there's only one person could advocate you. How can you be diligently as an employee that you make sure that you're planting a seed in so many different areas to make sure that when it comes to that layoff, someone will advocate that for you?
Exactly. And in smaller companies, it's oftentimes going to be your boss because there's only your boss and one other person. In bigger companies, your boss and your boss's boss may not even know the layoff's coming until like the day before, and they're basically given a list and say, here's the people you have to lay off, or do you have any major objections to this list of people who have to be laid off? But it definitely starts with your boss. But then there are piles of other opportunities, and I think this is an area where we're at disadvantage when we're working from home, because when you're in the office, you see your boss's boss, or you see, the general manager or the division or whatever. You can actually walk up to them and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know that we did this thing. My team was working on it, and I did this and this and this, and I found out it resulted in this great deal that we were able to land. And or you can point out that you're a customer success person. You can point out your retention, and how, hey, the company's really doing great because we're retaining all these customers that we were losing 2 quarters ago, and largely it's because of X, Y, and Z. So being able to just bump into people and have those kinds of conversations, I think, is a real advantage in establishing your worth to the organization across lots of layers and different people in the organization that you wouldn't normally see. And you may have to go out of your way to do it. So, but you want it to be kind of casual. You don't want it to be that you track the person down, but you, at the same time, you want to think ahead of time. And it's like, oh, if I see Jane, I want to plant a seed. So the next time you see her, you're able to do that. And it's not just people who make decisions, but you want to plant these seeds with lots of different people, because oftentimes when there's a layoff, the way it works is, the senior management will know there's a layoff coming, and so they'll start asking little questions. And this by the way will be like a tip in terms of how do I foresee a layoff coming. So they might ask questions like, hey, what do you think about the work that Ashley's done over the last a few months or whatever, or how is Ashley doing? And so you hear that, and there's a mental reservation that the person's using when they ask you this. They're not asking you, hey, we're thinking about laying off Ashley. What they're doing is they're in their mind, what they're saying is, hey, how's Ashley doing? But in the back of their mind, they're thinking, oh, we're building a list, and I'm curious, I'm wondering if should she be on it.
Wow.
So um so
This
by
is definitely
having
eye-opening. Yeah, like knowing the intent behind the questions when someone asks you that questions.
exactly, but 9 times out of 10 you get asked that question, it doesn't mean that somebody's about to get laid off. um or it might mean that they heard that you're a superstar and they want to hear more glowing reports. But when you start seeing a pattern of those kinds of questions, without any other explanation, that's a tip that, hey, maybe there's something coming. And then you can start talking to coworkers and other people, and again, without being alarmist, you can kind of get a better idea of what's going on.
Yeah. And like it's very common that for big companies to have team across the country, right? Like I understand that in person it definitely adds value. When I was a customer success manager, I would love to visit my customers. It just changes the whole relationship dynamic. What if you are being limited by the location, like which is in reality a lot of companies still practice remote work? What can you do to make sure that you're still showcasing the value without being in person?
I think it's a lot harder, but you have to look for creative ways to get the message across. So, for example, you might so I'm going to assume at least you know who's in the hierarchy. So you might do a report to your boss and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know, here's what happened with so and so. We had this project, it resulted in this great outcome. Um, and this is what I did, and why I did what I did, because I knew it was going to make this big outcome. And copy your boss's boss. They're going to want to hear it too. Why not, right? Because this
Mhm.
is this is not only demonstrating your value to the organization, but it's demonstrating that this kind of project works. Whatever the outcome was, right? This approach was a way to achieve the goal, and it worked. So just copy your boss's boss rather, so that now they know too. Another thing would be anytime you have a company event, where you get a chance to talk to somebody either virtually or in person, take advantage of that. Figure out a way to easily slip in some of the things you're working on and how exciting the outcomes are.
Mhm. Got it, got it. So if you cannot do remote, like you cannot, if you cannot do it in person, you have to be creative, like
You have
using.
to be creative, and again, it's like you need to do it in a way that's not obvious. And that's why it's so much easier in person, because you see people walking around, you can say, hey, blah blah blah, how's it going, blah blah blah, oh, by the way. And that becomes a lot more difficult in virtual environments. um, but I think working through your coworkers, bosses that are associated, like other departments you work with or whatever, be visible. Don't be a secret agent. You want to be visible. You want people to see what you're doing. And if it's in a virtual environment, then they can see what you're doing in a virtual environment. Don't be secret. Get out there and make your impression and make your contribution to the organization known.
Yeah. You bring up a really good point about being visible, right? Let me ask you this. Does this matter? So lately, there are some layoffs. It's also caused by the AI as well. AI
Hmm.
technically can sort of replace a copywriting job or any manual task, and that's what a lot of lower tasks are being eliminated, right? So let's say a person with on these levels of they're doing this level of tasks that have a lot of visibility um, in front of the management. However, the tasks that they're doing as of current market value might not seem as important.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is that person still prone to the layoff, or that person should do a better job?
I think they should do a better job of making their value known. And I think in the case of um, uh, AI or any kind of disruptive technology, if you think you're vulnerable to a technology, you probably are. And so, what's or any disruptive force, right? So, what's the best thing you can do? Embrace it. become the expert on how to make yourself and others more productive using it. So let's specifically talk about AI. But this is true for, back in the day it was true for word processing, it was true for Excel spreadsheets, it was true for marketing automation, and it's now true for artificial intelligence. Specifically, this kind of generative AI that we're dealing with now. Make yourself the department or the division expert in how to use it to make yourself more productive, to make everybody else more productive. And by the way, not only make yourselves more productive, but to take the output to the next level. So now I'm the expert that others are in my department are asking me, how do I use this? I'm the expert to make them more productive, but then also improve the output and drive better business outcomes. That's what it's all about. And so you need to figure out through embracing the new technology how you can best do that. And
Yeah.
it also helps with the secret agent problem because now you become this visible person that everybody's going to learn about this new thing that people are using in the organization.
Yeah, I think this could get very tricky because there's so many job functions out there, right? And sometimes the job function also applies of where you at. It's very tough to assess where you're at, what you can do. So all I want to say to the audience is that we have an email that you can find right here. So if you have any questions and you need further help, we're here to help you. Send us the questions that you have in mind. We are here very excited, we're delightful to help you to ease into this, get into better situation. And last but not least, so now we share a lot of practical tips, right? But there are times that you still get laid off, right? Regardless, maybe too late to implement all this strategy. My question to you is that, Michelle, if someone is impacted today, what is your advice to cope with that layoff? What would you do right away?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I think first, going back to a point we made earlier about broadening your skill set. Hopefully, you've been doing that. Hopefully, you've broadened your skill set because if you do get laid off and you've got a broader skill set, you can do more things. It's going to make finding that next job easier because you're more marketable. You're more valuable to an organization. Um, Secondly, hit the ground running. So if you get laid off at noon on Tuesday, at at 12:01 on Tuesday, your job is to find another job. So hit the ground running. Thirdly, talk to everybody you know. The people you know are the best sources for a new job. Highly leverage LinkedIn, talk to people you know, go to lunch with people, do whatever you need to do to make everyone know that, hey, I just got laid off. I'm a superstar and I'm looking for my new job. So hit the ground running. Thirdly, be creative. So identify companies that you might want to work for. Look those companies up on LinkedIn. Find the people who are hiring um, for positions like yourself, and then reach out to them, talk to them, in-mail to them, try to get their email address, find out, ask them, what their plans are for hiring in the future. Say, hey, I'm a marketing person. I did marketing automation for so and so company. I've been doing it for 5 years. I'm really good with HubSpot. I'm really good with Marketo. What are you guys using? So start to strike up a conversation. You'll be surprised how quickly when someone recognizes that you're genuine, that you're interested in what they're doing, and that you might have an opportunity to help them with the position that they're looking for, you'll be surprised how quickly they're ready, willing, and able to talk to you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Michelle. Like I remember when I was in a job search, I realized that during my resume, um, unfortunately do not help as much, and I have to use the LinkedIn route, use the email service, find who's the hiring manager. And what I did at that time is that instead of applying, like when you're applying your position is like that, right? You apply for the job. What I did was I find it very interesting, and actually the employer are very impressed is that, hey, instead of applying, I emailed to the hiring manager, just have a few key bullet points saying that, hey, I look at this job posting, you're looking for X, Y, and Z. I have this experience. I would like to see if you are a match. Or I would like
Hmm.
to discuss with you what I was looking for, like 15 minutes call, just to get on the call and understand the job positions. And towards the call, not only they get to make a decision whether they want to proceed, you get to make a decision you whether you want to proceed as well. So that way you don't waste each other time going to recruiters, going to the hiring process. You also want to make sure that you find the next job that really works for you as well. So I think there are a lot of like tips on online resources how you can reach out to recruiter, but I definitely in this particularly in this job market, you definitely have to be creative.
Yeah, I agree. Being creative, reaching out to your network, reaching out beyond your network. I think the most important thing is have a very positive attitude and hit the ground running. You've got immediately, this is your number one job. Find a new job.
Yep. And also I know that when it comes to like higher positions, right? Like it requires some case studies, presentations, help. If you guys need your help, feel free to email us. We are here to help you, provide you some guidelines to make sure that you ease to the next role as well. All right. Thank you so much for all this advice, Michelle. And thanks for everyone for listening. And I look forward to the next podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye.
bye.